Ahoy, mateys! Welcome to Podcasts of the Caribbean, a podcast covering the world of Pirates of the Caribbean, from the theme parks to the movies and everything in between. My name is Justin Helmer, and I will be your host on this voyage through the Caribbean. It'd be too late to alter course now, mateys. Hello and welcome back to Podcasts of the Caribbean. This is episode 36, and today we are covering the fourth book in the Young Jack Sparrow series, The Sword of Cortes. So this is the final book in the Sword of Cortes arc, as you would think from the name of the book, but it's far from the end of the series. So if you remember from last time, book 3, the pirate chase ended on a cliffhanger with Jack Sparrow reciting the mysterious incantation after reuniting the Sword of Cortes with its scabbard. Now, after Jack read that incantation, he and his crew assumed nothing happened until they realized that the ghost of Hernan Cortes, the conquistador, had materialized behind them. So it was a really awesome ending, and overall, book 3 was a lot of fun. So if you haven't listened to that episode or the previous episodes covering the first two books, I suggest you do that before listening to this, so you have the full story, as this book we're covering today will be pretty much referencing everything we have experienced in the series so far. And buckle up, this episode is going to be really exciting, since this book is jam-packed with all kinds of surprises. So it's going to be a really fun episode, so let's dive right into it. Without further ado, here is Book 4, The Sword of Cortes. Alright, so as I stated just a minute ago, Book 3 ended on the cliffhanger, so this book picks up immediately after it ends. So just like the pirate chase ended without a captain's log entry, this book doesn't have one at the start either. So we go immediately right back into the crew of the Barnacle, who have come face to face with the hellish spirit of Hernan Cortes. Now, while everyone stands frozen in fear, Jack is the only one who decides to step up and introduce himself. So let's go into the book to see Jack and Cortez' first meeting. So Jack says, "Well, hello there, mate. Captain Jack Sparrow, how very nice to meet you." Apart from Cortez's chest, which heaved and fell heavily, Jack thought this rather odd for a dead or undead guy. Cortes did not move. His breath stank like a barrel of rotten fish. Jack smiled uncomfortably, coughed, and dropped his arm. "So, mate, I suspect you've materialized here from wherever it is you dead people go in order to get the sword back, eh?" Cortes leaned forward, attempting to bow. This appeared to be quite difficult for him. His armor creaked and his bones seemed to crack. "The sword," Cortes said in a thickly accented English, "is now yours. You read the incantation. You invoked its power." The crew of the Barnacle was shocked and impressed that Jack was so at ease talking to a dead fellow. "So then," Jack said, "why are you here? A genie from a bottle or something like that? Just come along for the ride? Stick by your old sword whenever it may be imbued with godlike power?" "Oh wait, let me correct myself. Ye old sword that is supposed to be imbued with godlike power." Jack tapped the blade with his index finger. "Your little metal stick doesn't seem to be doing much of anything right now." "I am here, boy," Cortes said in a grave voice, clearly trying to put Jack in his place, "to teach you how to use this weapon." Jack's eyes brightened and he turned to his crew, smiling broadly. The crew was much less at ease with the current situation than their captain. Jack cleared his throat and clapped his hands together. "So, when do my lessons begin?" Cortes stepped forward, his armor grating and squeaking. "Now," he answered. There was a long pause. Cortes did not say anything more. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Want to give me a little more instruction than that, mate?" Jack asked. Behind his hand, he whispered to Arabella, "Now we know why he was a conquistador and not a schoolteacher in his former life." "Take the sword and point it toward the port's docks," Cortes told him. From the hilltop graveyard where they stood, Jack had a clear view of the docks below. He lifted the sword and pointed it at the dock farthest from where they had moored the Barnacle. An unbelievably powerful current of energy flowed through Jack's body and out through the sword. Instantly, it blew the empty dock out of the water. "Whoa!" was all Jack could muster. He examined the blade closely. It was smoking and smelled of sulfur. He could feel heat radiating from it onto his face. Cortes smiled. Jack quickly whirled around and pointed the sword at Constance, the mangy, obnoxious cat that Jack's crewmate John claimed was his sister under a curse. "Begone!" Jack shouted. "Constance!" Jean cried out in horror. But nothing happened. Constance just hissed at Jack, stretched and yawned. Then she sat down and curled her twitching tail around her. "I knew it wouldn't work, or else I wouldn't have tried it," Jack said quietly to John. He hoped he sounded convincing. John wasn't buying it. He scowled at Jack and ran to Constance, gathering the nasty, matted cat up in his arms. Just then, Cortes stepped up behind Jack. Cortes placed his slimy, decaying hands over Jack's and gripped the sword with him. "Do you think we can use this sword to clean you up a bit, mate? Maybe just to get rid of that awful smell?" Jack asked. Cortes did not seem to be bothered by Jack's quips. He extended Jack's arms, pointing the sword toward the sea. Another rush of energy flowed through Jack. A haze of vapor began to rise off the sea. It rapidly became thicker. Within seconds, the water along the entire coast of Isla Fortuna was violently boiling. Cortes stepped away from Jack, smiling smugly, and the sea simmered down. Then Cortes stepped up to Jack again, holding the sword together with him once more. Jack looked out at the turquoise Caribbean, the cutlass. In all the excitement, Jack had shoved to the back of his mind that despite the fact that the pirate himself was gone, Leftfoot Lewis's ship and crew were still docked right off the island. Cortes positioned Jack's arms and the sword so they were directly in line with the cutlass. The huge pirate ship with its signature crimson Jolly Roger shimmered on the sea. Then, with a quick blink, the ship vanished. "Guess that threat is over with," Jack said flatly. His crew was in awe. "Neither the ship nor the crew will interfere with you any longer," Cortes said. Jack shifted uncomfortably, unsettled by the fact that Cortes had made an entire ship and its crew disappear. And all the while, Jack had been holding the mystical sword. Cortes stepped away from Jack again. Jack wiped Cortez's slimy grime from his hands and stared at the sword in awe. He looked at Cortes, who was smiling, then turned his attention back to the sword, which glowed with a waning power, the way a hot iron would as it cooled. Finally, Jack turned to his crewmates. Their expressions ranged from uneasy to terrified. Could no one share in his enthusiasm? Jack rolled his eyes and stomped over to his trusted crew, who were waiting for him at the foot of the hill. Tumen, a Mayan sailor, looked particularly troubled. "Tumen," Jack said, smiling. He slapped the young sailor on the back. "Look alive, mate. What's eating at you?" "I'm just not feeling very well," Tumen said. "He does look pale," Arabella said, touching Tumen's forehead. "And he has a bit of a fever, too." "Well, never fear, Tumen, mate," Jack said. "Once I learn to properly wield this sword, I'll make you right as rain." "Jack," Tumen said, shaking his head and clearly straining to speak, "I don't trust this sword." "Well, you didn't seem to have any trust issues prior to discovering it." "That was before I saw what she could do," Tumen urged. "This type of power is dangerous. And what's worse is... Cortes." Tumen looked over at the ghastly figure and shuddered. He scourged the Yucatan before moving inland to defeat the Aztecs. This sword had a part in that slaughter. "But we said we'd take the sword and harness its power for different purposes. To free ourselves. To free the Caribbean from pirates and corrupt politicos and all sorts of other ne'er-do-wells," Jack said, waving his hand dismissively. "I have a different view now," Tumen said, slumping against a nearby tree to support himself. "As do I," Fitzwilliam P. Dalton III, the aristocratic runaway, chimed in. Seeing the corrosive conquistador in the flesh, or lack thereof, was really giving the crew a very different perspective. Cortes slaughtered an entire empire. He could have very well used that sword to do it. Families, Jack. Mothers, fathers, children. Let's think about this rationally. "Oh, you aristos in your rational behavior. Rational this and rational that," Jack said, waving the blade carelessly. "Fitzy, there is nothing remotely rational about this here sword, and I am convinced that I can make this work to our benefit. It might have made a lot of bad things happen in the past, but it doesn't have to be bad." The crew members stood silent, clearly united against Jack. Despite their earlier enthusiasm, now they had seen what the sword could do, none of the crew wanted its full power unleashed. Jack sneered. "You're either with me on this, or you're against me," Jack said. The crew, even Constance, still stood united in their defiance. "Very well then," Jack said. Turning his back on his crew, he started back toward Cortes. So Jack's crew is pretty much turned against him, given that they are all now opposed to the use of the Sword of Cortes. And now they have seen its power, they want nothing to do with it. Jack, of course, doesn't see why they're all stressed about it, so he turns away from them and heads back to Cortes. Something else that's also happening is that Tumen is not feeling very well and is beginning to look pale, along with developing a fever. This is something we'll come back to later, so keep this in mind. So once Jack leaves his crew, he goes back over to Cortes, eager to learn how to use the sword. Cortes's next lesson for Jack is to retrieve the sword by calling it toward him, which he tries to make Jack understand. Cortes stabs the sword into the ground and tells Jack to concentrate on it. Jack begins to imagine all the things he could do with the Sword of Cortes, and to his excitement, the sword slowly floats over to him, and Jack grabs it into his hand. And Cortes tells him to point the sword at a valley on the island, and out of nowhere, Jack is able to create a giant roaring river of water. So with this newfound confidence, Jack tries to do all sorts of other things, like turning the river red, making treasure fall from the sky, and making his crew cooperate with him. But none of this works, so Jack starts to get frustrated. So he gives the sword back to Cortes and tells him it seems to only work when he is telling Jack what to do with it. Jack then angers Cortes, whose eyes start to glow red, and Jack is actually scared here, which of course is a rarity for someone like him. But Cortes takes the sword, raises it in the air, and screams, which shakes the ground beneath Jack's feet, and all of a sudden, clouds roll in, thunder and rain starts, and then a cold gust of wind blows in before something entirely unexpected happens. It starts to snow on Isla Fortuna. It starts to snow in the Caribbean. So we're going to go back into the book here for our next entry. Cortes smiled smugly once more. "So, how do you like the new landscape?" he asked. Jack did not respond. He was clearly stunned. "Your first lesson is over," Cortes continued. "In fact, this first lesson will also be your last. You now know all you need to know." But Jack was not having it. He clearly did not, in fact, have the training he needed in order to properly work the sword. What was this Cortes mate trying to pull? "Jack!" John called out, running up the hill toward his captain. His crewmates were right behind him, their teeth chattering. They were not prepared for weather like this, especially on an island where the temperature rarely dropped below scorching. Jack casually pointed the sword toward the sky and commanded the snow to stop falling, but to no avail. Would he ever master this sword, especially now that Cortes was giving up on training him? "Jack, I'm worried about Tumen. He's getting worse," John said. Jack looked over at Tumen, who was supported on either arm by Arabella and Fitzwilliam. He looked only a shade healthier than Cortes. The cold and snow could not be good for such a sick sailor. "We need to take him back to town," Arabella said. "Jack, look at him. He's near death with whatever it is that's afflicting him. We need to get him into warm blankets and near a fire and some shelter. And that goes for the rest of us, too. Will you be joining us, or is your lesson that much more important than your crew?" "I resent that," Jack said. "Go on, I'll be there shortly." "Jack," Arabella said, "not long ago you convinced me not to do something I'd regret, not to become something I didn't want to become. I only hope I can convince you the same thing. Just, please be careful. I care for you, Jack. We all care for you." She kissed him on the cheek, gathered up the rest of the crew, and set off in search of shelter in the town below. Jack hesitated for a moment, then turned back to Cortes. "Okay, mate, now listen. I know that I can't use this sword just yet, despite what you say, so I'm asking you, about as kind as Jack Sparrow knows how, to show me how to use it." "I can make you a master of the sword," Cortes told him. "So, what are you waiting for?" Jack said. "But on a condition." "Of course it's a condition. What in the bloody Caribbean is not done on some condition or other? And what is said condition, senor?" "Retrieve for me the eye of the man who last wielded this sword. I want the stone eye that belonged to the pirate Stone-Eyed Sam." So, yeah, remember when I said this book is full of surprises? This is the first one. So if you don't remember, in the Siren song, which is book 2, Jack came face to face with the Sirens of Isla Serena and traded away his freedom so he could save his crew. And he gave them the eye of Stone-Eyed Sam for collateral. And if you remember, when Jack mentioned to them that he had the eye, the Sirens gasped, alluding to the fact that they knew something Jack didn't. So if Jack was ever to return to Isla Serena, he would be imprisoned there forever. So when Cortes mentions that he needs the eye, Jack immediately starts to get nervous as he remembers the deal he made with the Sirens. So Jack tries to play coy, and he asks where would he find something so obscure as a dead pirate's stone eye, but Cortes obviously knows that Jack knows where it is. So Jack reluctantly agrees and tells Cortes he will need the sword in case problems arise, and also in case he needs to use it against the Sirens. Cortes agrees and says that Jack must go on this mission alone. No one can accompany him. Cortes says that they cannot risk anyone interfering with their plans. And Jack finds it weird how Cortes is bringing Jack into all this, but Cortes tells him it is his plan as well if he wants to wield the full power of the sword. Jack asks Cortes how is he supposed to sail the Barnacle without a crew, but Cortes tells him whoever possesses the sword has no need of a crew. So Cortes tells Jack to point the sword toward the Barnacle, and out of nowhere, the Barnacle begins to split into two, wood shooting up into the air until the boat blows into pieces. And immediately, Jack is heartbroken at what he's just done, given that he has grown close to the Barnacle and all the experiences he shared on it. But once the smoke clears, in the Barnacle's place is a gigantic warship that barely fits into the dock. And on its broadside reads the name the Grand Barnacle. So Jack smiles seeing his new ship, but wonders how he will sail something like that by himself. You know, if he couldn't sail the Barnacle, which was a fishing boat, by himself, how is he supposed to sail a warship by himself? Cortes taps him on the shoulder with the sword and tells him that he now has everything he needs. So essentially, the sword can also act just like the Sword of Triton, which was Blackbeard's sword, in case you didn't know. So Jack can control the sails, the rigging, and all sorts of things with the sword. Very similar to the Sword of Triton. Jack then makes his way down to the Grand Barnacle and runs into Fitz and Arabella on the way. "So, that there's our ship, eh?" she asked Jack as he walked past the inn. "If you don't mind, milady, it's my ship, my sword, my adventure," Jack answered flatly, continuing his walk toward the Grand Barnacle. Arabella grabbed Jack by the arm and slapped him square across the face. Jack snarled and rubbed his cheek. "I didn't deserve that." "Oh, yes, you did, Jack. You deserve that and more," Arabella said. "I've had about enough of ye. A member of your crew is dying, and yet you're hopping off onto bedeviled ships and sailing away. You're not the Jack we know, the Jack who, for a forsaken reason, we all trust." "Oh, I don't know what all this fuss is about," Jack said. "I told you that you were either in this with me or you're not. You chose your side. So now I'll bid you adieu, farewell, ciao, sayonara, goodbye, and good riddance." "And how, pray tell, do you intend to sail a vessel such as the Grand Barnacle on your own?" Fitzwilliam asked. "I have my ways, mate," Jack answered. "It is impossible," Fitzwilliam responded. "A ship like that would require a crew of hundreds. You cannot do it on your own." "Oh, no?" Jack said. "Watch me." Jack pointed the sword at the Grand Barnacle and a gangplank lowered. "Ta for now," Jack said as he ascended the plank. "I'll be seeing you soon. Don't go anywhere in the meantime. Oh, wait, that's right, you can't go anywhere. There's not a boat left in the port." "You will regret your leaving us, Jack Sparrow," Fitzwilliam said, shaking his hand up at the boat. "I regret nothing, ever," Jack said as he pointed the sword at the gangplank to lift it. Then he waved the sword toward the lines and the anchor that held the great ship at dock. Both the lines and the anchor snapped back toward the ship, like snakes recoiling from fire. The Grand Barnacle slowly moved away from the snowy port and into the sunny heat of the Caribbean Sea. Jack waved his bandana mockingly at Fitzwilliam and Arabella as the ship pulled out. And as the figures of his land-bound crew grew smaller and smaller and finally disappeared in the distance, Jack Sparrow fought to quell any regrets he might have. So I love the inclusion of Arabella slapping Jack in the face and him replying, "I didn't deserve that," which of course is a fun little nod to the movies, like how Giselle and Scarlett slap him, along with Anna Maria and everything. A very cool little reference there. But at this point, Jack is alone on the Grand Barnacle, and he's sailing toward Isla Serena. So he starts finding the whole experience very boring, given that everything can literally be done by just swinging and waving the sword around. So he can even move clouds in, he can bring bunches of crabs up from the ocean onto the deck, and he can even have them magically cooked how he likes them. So he could literally do, honestly, anything he wants. And Jack starts to miss his crew, as obnoxious as they sometimes were. And he even missed Fitzy despite always arguing with him. And Jack knows he needs to go to Isla Serena, but he has no idea where to find it, given that the island resides in Davy Jones' locker, as we learned in the Sirens song. The island can magically appear pretty much anywhere. He decides to sail out to a place with no island in sight, so it would be easier to see an island appear out of nowhere. So Jack makes it to a barren spot in the ocean and waits, but he ends up falling asleep. But then he's woken up a little later when he hears a voice call out to him, and when Jack looks up, he sees a British Navy warship almost as big as the Grand Barnacle right in front of him. So the Commodore on the ship yells out to Jack to surrender, given that he's sailing in British waters with no registration. And Jack tells him he's simply passing through, but the Commodore tells him to surrender and bring out his captain and the rest of his crew. Jack laughs and tells him that he is the captain and he has no crew, and the Navy laughs back. And the Commodore tells Jack they'll be commandeering his ship, and that Jack, along with his crew, will need to answer some questions. And Jack continues to tell the Commodore that he is alone, but the Commodore is having none of it, and eventually tells his men to board and take no prisoners. So Jack warns them not to board, but the Commodore gives the order for his men to open fire, and Jack takes cover as explosions sound all around him. But what Jack realizes is that the Grand Barnacle is mysteriously firing back at the Navy ship, even though there's no crew to fire the cannons. And Jack sees the sword glowing, and he realizes it is the sword that is firing the cannons. And then he then sees Navy crewmen swinging over the Grand Barnacle, and Jack panics and points the sword at them, and he turns them into sea creatures. And no, by sea creatures, I don't mean like Flying Dutchman crew sea creatures. I mean literal sea creatures. They literally turn into octopus and starfish. It's kind of crazy. So we're going to go back in the book for this next little excerpt here. Shrouded in smoke, the naval officers on the ship could not see what had happened to their seamen, and so they continued the battle, firing off cannons, rifles, and anything else they could find. Jack could hear screams and hollers, and he knew that whatever was happening was not good at all. Suddenly, there was a tremendous sound, like an entire forest of trees falling before thousands of axes. Then a great plume of smoke rose over the deck. Jack felt the cannons blast below him. He struggled to steady himself as the jolts rattled the deck. A painful ripping sound resounded over the ocean, accompanied by screams and moans. This awful noise was followed by silence. Jack slowly crawled to the prow and peered over. The thick smoke was beginning to dissipate. Jack found it difficult to breathe. He couldn't stop coughing for the gunpowder that hung in the air around him. But the sea breezes soon carried the smoke away, revealing a horrifying sight. All that was left of the Navy ship was splintered timber and some remnants of the sails in the water before him. "No," Jack cried. "No, no, no! This can't be happening!" Jack waved the sword frantically toward the area where the Navy ship had been, trying to raise it from the depths, but nothing happened. He stared in disbelief, and splintered planks bobbed on the waves. But it was no use. The ship had gone to Davy Jones' locker. Stunned, Jack held his head in his hands for a moment. Then he quickly jumped up. In a furious panic, he began to race around the Grand Barnacle, examining it for damage. The ship had been rocked by explosions during the battle, but as Jack surveyed the ship, he didn't find a gash, a dent, or even a scratch on it. The sword had protected the Grand Barnacle, and Jack with it. Even for Jack, who was famous for taking things in stride, this was overwhelming, and more important, it changed everything. "Now listen here," he said to the sword through his clenched teeth. "I've had as much as I can take of this. I'm going to continue on this mission and retrieve my stone eye. Being that so many people and non-people want to get their hands on it, it must be worth something. Plus, with all the mysterious pieces to your puzzle, scabbards, incantations, how do I know I don't need it to cement your power? Then, I'm going to learn to use that power, really use it, and once I do, we're going to use your power to free my mates from that snow-covered isle, and also I'll use your power to heal my dying sailor. And then, we're going to send that decrepit, smelly old half-dead owner of yours back to whatever grave he crawled out of. Savvy?" Jack raised his chin proudly and set the sword back in its sheath. As he did, the Grand Barnacle began to rock. Jack was tossed from one end of the deck to the other. "Is there not a moment's rest here?" Jack asked, exasperated. The waves became fierce, and a bone-chilling mist gathered around the boat. He knew then what was happening, and he smiled. The mist thickened. There was a great explosion that sent a roaring sound over the sea. Waves sprayed over the deck. Then the water settled. The mist began to lift, and under the light of the dying sun, the silhouette of Isla Serena appeared on the horizon. So Jack then points the sword toward Isla Serena, and the Grand Barnacle begins to sail toward it. But then he feels the ship come to a stop abruptly about a mile out, and he looks down in the water, and he sees the ship is now stuck on a reef. But then a voice calls out to Jack from the ocean. So we're going to go right back into the book again for this next little excerpt here. So Jack says, "Now what?" "Jack Sparrow," a whispery voice called out, wafting over the ocean. Jack looked around with a mix of confusion, suspicion, and caution. "Jack Sparrow," came the voice again. It was clearly female. Jack looked over the prow. Still no sign of the merfolk, but he knew they were here. All they needed to do was show themselves. "Come on, Scaly Tails," Jack shouted. "Come out and play." "Captain," a new voice called out. This one was deeper. "Jack," still another voice cried. This one sounded very familiar. "Belle?" Jack asked. "Jack, help us. Come back. We need you." A voice that sounded just like Arabella's rang out over the waves. Jack had encountered the merfolk before. He knew their games. "Stop it, Scaly Tails. I'm on to you." "But Jack, I care for you. We all care for you," the voice that sounded like Arabella's said tauntingly. Jack was getting angrier. "Jack!" Two new voices sailed over the waves. "Tumen? John?" Then more voices joined them. They called Jack's name over and over again. "Jack! Jack Sparrow! Captain Jack Sparrow!" "Stop it!" Jack shouted, holding his ears. "Stop it right now!" The voices stopped suddenly. "Ah, that's better," Jack said, smiling. But the water around the ship began to splash and turn. Suddenly, mermaids shot up from the depths, surrounding the Grand Barnacle. One after another, they emerged from the sea. In a few seconds, there were 100 of them, then 500. And then, before he even knew what was happening, thousands of mermaids had surrounded the Grand Barnacle, and they all had one thing in common. "Green tails," Jack said soberly. The green tails, Jack had learned, were the military arm of mermaid society. If they had a nasty bark, their bite was worse. Jack had the tooth mark scars to prove it. Jack could not get away even if he wanted to now. The ship was completely blockaded by the green tails. Unless, Jack thought for a moment about using the sword. But after what had just happened with the Navy ship, he thought the better of it. He did not want any more blood on his hands. "I'll only use that blasted thing when I really need to," he said. Besides, he was here to turn himself in, not to stage an attack. What could the Green-Tail Army do? Rip him to shreds and one piece at a time? On second thought, maybe they could. He preferred not to think about it. "Good day, Scaly Tails," Jack said, placing his hand over his heart and bowing. "I have come to see your blue-tail leaders, whose names I have never had the fortune to learn. Can one of you, or better yet, all of you, go run and let them know I'm here for my appointment?" "Jack Sparrow," one of the Green-Tails hissed, "you will be brought to the chairwomen. They will not be brought to you." Ah, chairwomen. One step closer to knowing their names now. Funny choice of title, though, being that they have no legs and they could never possibly sit. "Silence," the Green-Tails said, in their voices echoing over the sea. Okay, no need to get all hissy." "Step from your vessel now," they commanded. Jack shrugged. He had little choice. He lowered the gangplank the only way he knew, by using the sword, and descended into the mermaid-filled water. Toward the bottom of the plank, mermaids latched onto his ankles and began to drag him down into the sea. Jack was underwater for what felt like only seconds before he emerged in a long, cavernous tunnel that was filled with water up to his neck. "Funny how this place works," Jack said. "One second you're only feet below the water, and the next you're in a corridor filled with air." He wasn't sure he'd ever get used to stuff like this. The Green-Tails ignored him. They escorted him toward the well-lit chamber at the end of the tunnel. As he approached, Jack recognized it as the chamber where the chairwomen held court. Sure enough, as he entered, the 3 blue tails were lying upon their thrones, their tails flicking. "Jack Sparrow," the 3 mermaids said in unison. I'm getting pretty sick of hearing my name over and over," Jack said. "You have come to submit to us, yes?" the blue tail on the center throne asked. Well, sort of. The blue tail shot him an angry glare. Kind of? Jack said, shifting uncomfortably. The mermaid's tails all flicked faster. Well, okay, yes, I have, Jack said, dropping his head to acknowledge defeat. The blue tail smiled, and their pointy teeth gnashed as they laughed. Then the blue tail seated on the right noticed the sword at Jack's side, and her eyes widened. Morvarin, she said to the blue tail who sat in the center. Ah, your name is Morvarin, Jack shouted to the mermaid in the center, elated. Then he frowned. Funny, I thought you looked more like a Susan. The blue tails ignored him and continued their discussion. Morvarin, the sword. Morvarin nodded. Jack Sparrow, she said. We will bring you and your sword to your chamber now. Come. Now, wait a minute, Jack protested. You have something of mine that I'd like back first. The collateral I left with you last time I visited your cozy home. You know what I'm talking about. Little round stone, sort of looks like an eye. Your collateral will not be returned to you until you are safely confined. Only then will you have submitted to us your greatest treasure. By our agreement, you owe us your freedom, Morvarin said. And by the rules of collateral, the other two blue tails hissed in unison, you must pay your debt in full before the object is returned. Now that's not exactly fair, Jack said. I believe there must be something we can work out here. Let's make a deal. Very well, Morvarin said. We will accept the sword. If you give it to us, you may keep your freedom. Otherwise, you keep the sword, and you are both imprisoned here. Jack knew he still needed the power of the cursed sword in order to save his crew and defeat Cortes. Yet the stone eye was looking more attractive than ever to him, since everyone else seemed to want it. Which should he choose, stone or sword? I have a better idea, Jack said, thinking fast. I propose a duel. If I win, I go free with my sword and with my stone. If I lose, I stay here with you for eternity. You get to keep the eye, and the sword is yours, too. The three blue tails all whispered to one another. We find this a fair bargain, Morvarin said. Yes, the others hissed. Prepare the battle chamber, Morvarin shouted. Half a dozen red tails, the servants of merfolk society, who were always waiting around waiting for orders, made their way to the far end of the chamber. They gripped heavy chains at either end of a huge iron gate. As they pulled, the gate lifted, revealing a wide alcove. You mean I have to go in there? Jack asked. But before he could say any more, the red tails were guiding him through the waist-high water. Once he was inside the alcove, the iron lattice-work gate crashed down, sealing the area off. Jack was trapped. Are you lot not playing fair again? Jack shouted at the mermaids on the other side of the gate. You said I could duel for my freedom. Oh, you can, Morvarin said. But we never said who or what you would be dueling. With that, Jack heard a fierce rumbling in the enclosed chamber. At the far end of the alcove, he saw two huge, glowing yellow eyes. Oh no. Then from the opposite side, in a dark, cavernous part of the cell, he heard heavy footsteps, like an elephant's might sound, coming right toward him. The second creature stepped out from the shadows just enough that Jack could see its yellow eyes, too. It roared, baring huge, razor-like teeth. This is not good, Jack said. But at least he still had the sword. The beasts moved toward him. Now Jack could see them clearly. They looked like iguanas, but they were much, much larger, with much sharper claws and much more powerful teeth. Gripping his sword, Jack backed away from the terrifying creatures. One more thing, Jack Sparrow, Morvarin said. That sword in your hands is powerless against the creatures who reside in Davy Jones' locker, including your opponents. The three blue tails smiled and then addressed Jack in unison. Good luck, Jack Sparrow. So now Jack is stuck in this arena, and he's facing off against these two large iguana-like creatures. And there is an illustration in the book showing these creatures, but they are essentially just humongous iguanas. So we're going to go back into the book again to witness Jack's fight with these iguanas. Jack looked at the closed gate behind him. Then he looked to either side of him. The only place he couldn't bring himself to look was dead ahead. The creatures were there, and they looked hungry. Their growls rang out like the roars of jaguars echoing in the cavernous chamber. Finally, Jack was forced to face the creatures as they lunged forward to attack. One of the beasts took a quick swipe at Jack, just missing him. Jack examined his arm to make sure it was still attached to the rest of his body. Can't we act like civilized beasties? He asked them. The beasts roared. Guess not. Jack sprang forward, brandishing the sword. Even though its mystical powers wouldn't work against the creatures, it still had a sharp blade. If Jack could steady his hand well enough to take aim, he'd have the beast down in no time. But landing the sword on a slithering creature was not easy, and Jack was having difficulty even coming close. The beasts, on the other hand, had little problem cornering Jack. Jack jumped back, escaping just in time as one of the beasts clawed at his legs. Jack had to come up with a plan. He couldn't keep darting around simply to stay alive. It wouldn't be long before he grew tired and fell prey to the two slobbering creatures. As the two beasts closed in on him from either side, he sprang out from between them to the far end of the cell. They slammed their heads together and roared. "Aha!" Jack shouted. "That's it! Come and get me, beasties!" Jack called, luring the beast to the center of the chamber. The creatures stalked over. As they sprang at him, Jack nimbly leaped from their paths. The beasts slammed into each other once again, this time with such force that they bounced off and hit the floor. Wearily, they made their way back to their feet. They turned their attention to Jack once more. The beast to his right was crouched on his haunches, ready to pounce. The other on his left had its maw opened wide, prepared to devour Jack whole. "If this doesn't work out, know that it was not very nice knowing you, mates," Jack said to the beasts. Taking a deep breath, Jack vaulted off a nearby boulder and threw himself toward the open-mouthed monster. The other beast ran stealthily after him, but just before both creatures came down on him, the nimble sailor jumped out of their paths. The two beasts fell upon each other, clawing and tearing. In fact, it looked like they'd forgotten all about Jack. Before long, the battle was over. The beasts had finished each other off, and Jack was victorious. Jack wiped his hands and smiled. He calmly walked over to the chamber gate. "Well, that's sorted out now, isn't it?" he said to his captors. Morvrin did not look pleased. Her expression turned from disappointment to resignation. She nodded to the Redtails, who pulled on the heavy chains and raised the gate. "Thanks, lasses," Jack said smoothly, winking at them. Jack stepped before the three blue-tailed mermaids and turned to Morvrin. "Now, where were we?" Jack said. "Oh, yes. You were about to let me leave here with my sword, my freedom, and my stone. We are bound by our agreement. You have won these things fairly, and so you are free to leave. You may take the sword," Morvrin said. "Wonderful. And my stone eye?" Jack asked. "That item is being held by Tia Dalma," Morvrin said. "Excuse me, come again? Pardon-moi?" "We are no longer in possession of the eye. It is with the great mystic Tia Dalma in her shack on the Pantano River," Morvrin said. "To retrieve it, you must go there. And she'll just hand it over, just like that?" "She will abide by the rules of this fair duel. That is all we will say," the mermaid at Morvrin's right said. "Tell her you were sent by Morvrin, Aquala, and Aquila, and that the stone is yours by right. She has ways of knowing this is true." "Let me guess," Jack said, pointing to the mermaid at Morvrin's right, who had the distinction of a pair of wings growing from her back. "You're Aquala, and your friend over there is Aquila." "Incorrect," she hissed. "I am Aquila." "Yes, well, tomato, Jack said. The mermaids were not amused. The three chairwomen glared at Jack. It was clear they had enough of him. "Leave at once," Morvrin said. "Very well, if you insist. I will reluctantly leave this lair while I was almost killed by raging beasties and nearly taken prisoner for the rest of my mortal days. Yes, it will be very difficult to leave," Jack said sarcastically. "Now, would someone be kind enough to show me the way out? And if possible, can we take a back exit or something? Not to be rude, but that tunnel I came in by is a little dilapidated and unceremonious." "You don't need us to show you the way," all three Bluetails hissed. Aquila motioned to the sword. "Ah, right," Jack said. He lifted the sword above his head and looked around cautiously. All eyes were on him. He had to make this work. Without hesitation, he conjured up the most powerful wish he could think of. "Remove me from these scaly-tail freaks presently!" To Jack's amazement, the room began to glow. It became brighter and brighter, until Jack was enveloped in a sea of light, too bright for his eyes. He shut them tightly against the glare. When he opened them again, he was back aboard the Grand Barnacle. Looking around, Jack realized the ship was sailing toward a familiar place, the mouth of the Pantano River. He took a deep breath. He never liked going to see Tia Dalma, but he knew that he had no choice if he wanted to return to Isla Fortuna with everything he might need to save his crew. And he was beginning to realize that the Stone Eye might have a crucial role in any power play he'd be engaging in. He climbed aboard one of the Grand Barnacle's longboats and waved the sword. With the help of the sword's power, the boat fell softly onto the water. Then Jack began to row up the swampy terrain toward Tia Dalma's shack. So for just a quick recap, once Jack defeats the creatures, the Sirens tell him that Stone-Eyed Sam's eye is now in possession of Tia Dalma. So we're finally getting to see Tia Dalma in this series. This is a very exciting moment. So now if you remember, Jack has played off not knowing Tia Dalma to his crew, especially John. But we will come to find out here that they already know each other. So let's go back into the book and read this next chapter. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. So let's take a look at Jack and Tia Dalma's meeting here. "Jack Sparrow," Tia Dalma said, welcoming him to her home. "What do you have for me?" She was a beautiful woman of the islands who spoke with a Caribbean accent. Jack climbed out of his longboat and onto Tia Dalma's porch, which was surrounded by swamp water. Because he didn't have any payment, which Jack knew she would request, he tried to steer the conversation in another direction. "What? No hello, how are you? Been a long time?" he asked. "Come inside," Tia Dalma said. Jack stepped into the candlelit shack. It was filled all over with jars of herbs and spices, bottles full of potions, caged animals, bones, everything the greatest mystic in the Caribbean could need. Tia Dalma stared at Jack with her wild eyes, and she smiled when she saw the sword. "I see you've gotten yourself into a mess again, have you?" Tia Dalma said. "The word on the winds is that you are drowning." "Drowning?" Jack asked. No, there's no drowning going on." "I was always a good swimmer," he said, placing a hand on the sword. "You can drown in things other than water. The sword is full of power that is most difficult to balance, Jack Sparrow." As she spoke, she moved about her shack, arranging curiosities and petting a kind of animal that Jack had never seen before. "Well, I have no choice. There are things I need to do with it." "The waves say it has done things already. Have those things not been enough?" Tia Dalma asked. Jack was silent for a moment, thinking about all the things the sword had done. It was supposed to have been his greatest treasure. It was supposed to have granted him freedom, and yet all it accomplished was alienating him from his crew and enslaving him to the will of Cortes. "Look, I'm here because Morvarin, Aquila, and Aquala sent me," Jack said. "They gave you something that was not theirs to give, being that it was already mine, and I want it back." Tia Dalma sighed, walked over to a shelf, and lifted a small bottle containing a greenish liquid. She filled a bowl with water and placed a drop of the green stuff into the bowl. She stared into the bowl briefly and then turned to Jack. "It is so," she said, standing up and walking toward the rear of the shack. Presumably to retrieve the eye, Jack thought. "The one you left has been looking for you," Tia Dalma said while she gracefully searched her canisters and containers. "Oh, everyone's looking for me, love," Jack winked. "But it is not all of them that you want to avoid, and the one I speak of is one you do." "Can't you ever just state something clear and concise like?" Jack asked. Tia Dalma smiled. "Just be warned, him came here looking for you. Him wants his ring back." Jack gasped. Now he knew who she was talking about, and it was someone Jack really did not want to see. In fact, it was someone he had been running from for a while. Talking about it was giving him a knot in his stomach. He once again decided to change the subject, though he knew Tia Dalma would eventually turn the conversation back to a difficult topic of some sort or other. "So this mate I'm sailing with says you turned his sister into a cat. Is it true?" "You sail with a powerful crew, Jack Sparrow," Tia Dalma said, clearly evading Jack's question. "Do they know you are here?" "I've not even told them I know you. Kept it quiet, actually. Even pretended on a few occasions I didn't know you," Jack said. "Wise. But they have proven worthy. They will convene here soon," Tia Dalma said. To Jack, it seemed this was both a request and a statement of fact. Yes, of course. Now where is my Stone-Eye Sam's eye stone thing?" Jack asked, growing impatient. "You know I demand payment," Tia Dalma said, smiling widely and staring at the sword. "Even for this stone which you say is yours." "You want this here thing?" Jack asked, motioning to the sword. No, you don't want this. It's rather useless, hardly works." "I will accept no other payment," Tia Dalma said, crossing her arms. "There is a minor complication," Jack said. "I needed to save the crew that you want so badly meet." Tia Dalma was clearly becoming annoyed. She walked to her table and slammed a bucket of crab claws down on it. Sorry, love, not very hungry right now, Jack said. Tiadama shot Jack a warning glance and poured the claws onto the tabletop. She arranged them in different configurations. Jack knew then she was reading a message in them. Once she had received a satisfying answer, Tiadama sighed. She walked back to Jack and handed him the stone eye. You will give me fair payment, she said, when you have done all you set out to do and learned all you were meant to learn. This I cannot interfere with. This stone holds great power, greater even than of the sword. But its power is not easily unlocked. The stone itself is locked. It is a prison cell far smaller than any of you have ever known. Jack's head was reeling, and as he often did, Jack looked at Tiadama as if she were crazy. In truth, he knew she was anything but. She just spoke in a way that needed to be decoded. You will need these. She handed Jack 2 beads, one white and one red. When you are ready to unleash the power of this eye, and only at that time, know it is red over white, and they must be tied to your person. Do this all and hold the eye. Only when you are ready, only when you know you need to. No sooner. Jack placed the beads in separate pockets of his vest, just to make sure they wouldn't accidentally catch on a thread and touch, thereby unleashing the stone's power, whatever that power might be. As unlikely as that seemed, Jack didn't want to risk it. Thank you, milady, Jack said, bowing. He moved to leave, but Tiadama grabbed his arm. Do not be fooled, do not be arrogant. You are not safe yet, Jack Sparrow, she said, looking him in the eyes. She stared at him a moment and raised her eyebrows warningly. Very well, Jack said uncomfortably. I will be seeing you soon. Yes, Tiadama said. You will, surely, and you will bring with you my payment. Jack grimaced. Take this as a parting gift, Tiadama said, handing Jack a bundle of dried herbs. What is it? Jack asked. A rare magical herb called catnip, Tiadama answered. It can undo what has been done, and it can redo what it has undone, Tiadama said, winking. Jack smiled, then quickly left Tiadama's shack. He jumped into his longboat and rowed toward the Grand Barnacle at the mouth of the river. So we leave Tiadama and we head back to Isla Fortuna. But now I want to bring up something Tiadama said to Jack in that last chapter, where she said someone had come to her looking for Jack and that he wants his ring back. Jack immediately knows who she is talking about, so I'll leave you all with that mystery for now. But Jack docks the Grand Barnacle back in Puerto San Judas, now with the Sword of Cortes, the Stone Eye, and the beads from Tiadama. And as soon as he disembarks, Arabella, Fitzy, and John run up to him asking where he has been. Arabella tells him that he's been gone for days, but Jack says it only felt like a few hours to him. They tell him Tumen's condition is getting worse, and John says that he doesn't think he's going to make it. Jack scoffs and tells him he currently has all the power of the Caribbean, and he can heal Tumen and fix everything. So everyone rushes to the inn, eager to get back to Tumen. So we're going to go back into the book here for this little entry. The others rushed back to the inn, and Jack followed close behind. Inside, a huge fire was keeping the room at a comfortable temperature, but the specter of illness, and Jack hated to think it, death hung over the room. Tumen, lad, Jack shouted, smiling. Tumen was wheezing heavily and could barely lift his head. Jack sat beside him casually, with one leg bent and the other stretched out. Look, mate, Jack said, I've got the sword here. I'm getting better at using it, and I can fix you so you're right as rain. Just give me a second, Jack said, standing up beside Tumen and flailing his hands theatrically as he were casting a mystical incantation. Jack pulled the sword from its scabbard and waved it over Tumen. But Tumen's response was not what Jack had anticipated. Instead of moaning a sigh of relief, jumping up and thanking Jack for saving him, Tumen began to cough violently. Arabella stood near the corner of the room, holding her hand over her mouth, choking back tears. Fitzwilliam stood nearby, his arms folded and his legs planted firmly apart, glaring angrily at Jack. We could have taken him away from this cursed island to a place where he could have recovered, Fitzwilliam said. Instead, you sailed off for who knows what reason, while the chap laid here suffering. Jack was getting angry. He was not sure if he was angry at himself, at Cortes, or the sword, but he decided to take it out on Fitzwilliam. He pointed the sword at the aristocrat. Listen here, mate. I've had about enough of you and your mouthing off, Jack said. Now back off and I'll take care of this, savvy? Fitzwilliam did not respond. John's mouth was quivering and he was no longer able to hold back his tears. Constance mewed pitifully by Tumen's side. Jack did his magical incantation hand thing again and waved the sword over Tumen once again. This time, Tumen screamed in agony. It was clear the sword was having a negative impact on him. Jack was beginning to realize that the sword or Cortes, or a combination of the two, had made Tumen sick in the first place. John ran to Arabella and clutched at her for comfort. Arabella held him close, trying to remain strong. Fitzwilliam's anger was welling. "His blood will be on your hands," Fitzwilliam said to Jack. "No," Jack said flatly. "His blood will be on no one's hands, because he is going to be all right." He leaned in toward Tumen. "Do you hear me, mate? You're going to be all right," he said nervously. Fighting the urge to shed tears himself, he sprang up and ran toward the door. "Jack, where are you going?" Arabella asked. "I am going to have a talk with the devil himself," Jack said. "We're coming with you," Fitzwilliam said. "No," Jack shouted. "You're all staying here. Captain's orders." Jack threw the door open and disappeared into the snow. So things are getting very dire here, with Tumen literally on death's door. And Jack angrily makes his way back to Cortes, who is still standing right where Jack had left him. And we're going to go back into the book again here, because we're getting to the end, and it's getting very juicy. So Jack calls out, "You there!" Cortes did not move. "You, Cortes, I'm back," Jack said. "I'm not surprised," Cortes said. "With the power of the sword at your side, there was little doubt in my mind that you would complete your mission." "Yes, well, it wasn't just the sword," Jack said. "In fact, my wiles proved a lot more beneficial to me than the sword itself. The blasted thing didn't work against half the adversaries I faced anyway." Cortes was taken aback. "You were in Davy Jones's lair?" Cortes asked, noting that those who come from Davy Jones' locker were the only beings who could not be affected by the sword's power. "Right you are." Jack knew this wasn't entirely true. Ela Serena moved back and forth from Davy Jones' locker to the surface world. It wasn't in Davy Jones' locker when Jack visited it. At least he didn't think it was. But saying he had been to Davy Jones' locker and back sounded impressive. "Impossible," Cortes grumbled. "No, actually, it's not, and I'm living proof of it." Cortes looked skeptical. "So you've brought back my stone, have you?" Cortes asked. "I have brought back the stone, yes, but I beg to differ on whose stone it is. See, mate, I say it's mine. I won it fair and square not long ago on Isla Escalatica," Jack said. Cortes's eyes glowed a deeper shade of red. "Give it to me," he demanded. "Not till you do something for me," Jack said. "Now, I know that sounds like a big favor to ask of you, who has done little or nothing for me since we've met, but think of all I did for you. You'd still be 6 feet under, or in an urn or a mausoleum somewhere if I didn't call you back from the dead," Jack smiled proudly. "So I think you owe me one." He whispered to Cortes, trying not to lean in too closely to the putrid conquistador. "What is your price?" Cortes asked angrily. "I want you to show me how to use this sword here," Jack said, tapping at the hilt of the sword of Cortes. "Fully and completely. Savvy?" Cortes laughed hauntingly. "Fool! You think this is all about you," Cortes said. "You think the power of the sword was meant for the likes of you. You, who are little more than a bilge rat." "I take offense to that," Jack said. "Were I a rat, I would certainly not reside in a bilge. I am a captain after all. The power of the sword is meant for me and my purposes alone. I worried that a mind as sharp as yours would have figured that out by now. But it was also why I chose you over your little friends. You possess the wit, cunning, and grace to have retrieved the stone for me. And the stone is all I need to regain absolute power. Did you not notice that the sword only worked in order to advance your goal, my goal, really, of procuring the stone?" "I did notice that, in fact," Jack said. But in truth, he had been so amazed by the sword's power that he hadn't realized it till now. He had wanted the sword because he thought it would give him freedom. But now he had found that the sword was enslaving him to Cortes. No matter what power the sword offered, no payoff was great enough for Jack to relinquish what he treasured most in the world, his freedom. "I was not able to retrieve the eye myself," Cortes said, "because the seas are far too dangerous for me. Davy Jones wants the sword. Tiadama would surely want to rein in my power, and the Aztec spirits are still bitterly opposed to me. But now that will all change. With the sword I will have godlike power, and with the stone eye I will control the spirits, for they are contained in its confines. I will rule not only the Caribbean, but the seven seas, Cortes shouted. Jack suddenly understood what Tia Dalma meant when she said the eye was a prison. He laughed quietly, thinking how ridiculous it was that he had been carrying powerful spirits around in his pocket. Then Jack heard someone call his name. He looked down the hill and saw Arabella running toward him. "Jack, you must come quickly," she said, trying to catch her breath. "It's Tumen." She trailed off, trying to compose herself. She didn't need to say any more. Jack knew immediately what had happened. He had just lost his youngest crewmate. Tumen was gone. So Jack instantly becomes furious when he hears this, because even through everything, he wasn't able to save Tumen. And let me tell you, the first time I read this, I was actually shocked that they actually did something like this in a Disney book. But we will come back to this in a minute, as Jack has finally had enough of Cortes. And he goes over to Cortes, who is laughing. And I love how Jack says, "You won't be laughing in a second, mate." Cortes tells Jack he is a fool and that he can't defeat the dead. But Jack has an ace up his sleeve. And he holds up the stone eye and immediately sees the look of fear on Cortez's face. Cortes hides his concern and tells Jack he lied and the eye is actually useless. But Jack knows he can use this to his advantage. So Jack says, "Then why do you want it so badly?" And Cortes goes silent. And he then says even if it did have power, Jack wouldn't know how to release it. But fortunately for Jack, Tia Dalma told him how. So he takes out the 2 beads Tia Dalma gave him, and Cortes laughs. But when Jack mentions that Tia Dalma gave them to him, Cortez's eyes go wide. So Jack starts to do just as Tia Dalma said with the beads. And let's go in back to the book for our big climactic moment here. Jack began to twirl his long hair until he had twisted several strands into one long lock. Unlike you, who really didn't need to teach me a thing about how to use that dumb sword. You know, you really have to get your act together, Cortesy. Jack took the red bead and threaded it through the lock he'd made. "You're going down, mate, and your cursed sword is going with you," Jack said to Cortes. He slipped the white bead onto the lock and knotted his hair at the end to hold the beads in place. Then he held the stone eye up to Cortez's decaying face. Yet not even Jack was prepared for what happened next. The instant the beads touched, red over white, the stone eye exploded. Streams of light burst from it like fireworks, whistling skyward. They expanded as they hit the air and dispersed into all directions, flying from the snowy island out over the Caribbean Sea and beyond. "The spirits!" Cortes yelled. They emerged from the small rock in what seemed like an endless flood, and they filled the sky like the aurora borealis. There was a moment of relative quiet, and then the loudest explosion yet rocked the island. From the fire and smoke emerged a spirit larger and more human-like than all the others. The spirit faced Cortes, who looked disturbed. "Montezuma," Cortes mumbled. "I see you two know each other," Jack said. He extended his hand to the spirit. "Jack Sparrow here, mate. Very nice to meet you." Montezuma shot Jack a warning glance. "All right then," Jack said, stepping back. "Carry on." "Cortes," the spirit said, "you disgraced me and my empire. Because of you I was stoned by my own subjects. Know now that I am here to retrieve the power you stole." Arabella moved close to Jack and clung to him. "Jack, do you know what's happening?" she asked. "Well, the true fact of the matter is, I have not the slightest idea," Jack replied. "I think Cortes called the spirit Montezuma," Arabella said. "That's the word in Nahuatl, the Aztec language, for Montezuma, an emperor of the Aztec Empire. He was subordinate to Cortes, thinking the conquistador was the god Quetzalcoatl. Even when Cortes began to destroy the traditions of the Aztec Empire and massacred its people, Montezuma did not relent in his support. Perhaps the sword had something to do with his loyalty. In the end, Montezuma was stoned with rocks and darts by his own people for urging them to retreat rather than fight the Spaniards. Some say he died loyal to Cortes. "Well, looks like that friendship didn't last terribly long in the afterlife," Jack said. Jack felt a sudden tingle in his hand. The sword was glowing again, and then it vanished and reappeared moments later in Cortes's hand. "That sword held sway over me once," Montezuma said. "Never will it again." Ignoring his warning, Cortes lunged toward his opponent with his sword drawn. Montezuma lifted his hands and created an energy field, which blocked the sword. "Wow," Jack said. Montezuma spread his arms and 2 swords of light appeared in his hands. "I don't understand," Arabella said. "Love, nothing has made much sense since we set sail from Tortuga. No, Montezuma was also said to be a philosopher and a sage, not a warrior. He even took the throne reluctantly. So why is he fighting now? Betrayal and death will do that to a fellow, I guess," Jack responded. There was another explosion as Montezuma and Cortes locked swords. Sparks of magical light and energy flew off the blades each time they clashed, and then Montezuma made a decisive blow, knocking the sword from Cortes's hand. It flew to the ground, smoking with heat and melting the snow around it. Arabella and Jack looked down at it. Jack reached down to retrieve it, but Arabella held him back. "No, Jack, wait till this is through." The 2 teenagers watched as Montezuma gripped Cortes under his arms and lifted him into the air. Montezuma suddenly took flight, leaving a trail of fire in his wake as he flew over the sea. Then he made a quick turn downward and plunged into the water with Cortes. The water steamed and boiled, and then there was silence. Jack and Arabella watched in anticipation. At last, Montezuma re-emerged from the sea, without Cortes. The spirit flew back toward the island, over Jack and Arabella's heads. Finally, he hovered over the inn where Fitzwilliam and John were watching over Tumen. The spirit shone brightly, filling the space above and around the inn with light brighter than the sun. It was the brightest light Jack had ever seen. A moment later, the spirit flew off northwestward. Jack twisted the beads in his hair uncomfortably. He turned to Arabella, who expressed a look of shock. "Belle, are you okay?" he asked her. Then Arabella collapsed against Jack. As tough as she was, what had just transpired was far too much for her to bear. Still, Arabella began to wake almost immediately. Jack made sure she was all right, then bent down to pick up the sword. "Jack, what are you doing?" Arabella cried out. "Trust me, love, I've one more thing to do with this blasted sword." Jack eyed the sword with grave disappointment. It had promised so much. It should have been his ticket to freedom. Instead, like its namesake, was just a despot that made anyone who wielded its power a pawn in its game. Jack lifted the sword in the air. With Cortes gone, he suspected it would obey him. It only had one master now. "Now, mate," he said to the sword, "undo anything you've done that would have helped your old master. Undo the things that would have pleased Cortes." The town square lit up, and the confused citizens of Puerto San Judas reappeared. The docks were repaired and full of ships. Much to his disappointment, the Grand Barnacle had transformed back into the little fishing vessel Jack and his crew were used to. "Would have been a chore to sail that thing, just the 5 of us anyway," Jack said. Jack looked out over the sea and noticed a familiar ship sailing near the horizon. It was the Royal Navy vessel the sword had sunk out at sea. Jack heaved a sigh of relief. He wondered if the crew remembered anything of what had happened. And then there were certain things that strangely didn't change at all. The snow was still falling, though lightly now, over Isla Fortuna, and Leftfoot Lewis and his crew, whom the storm had conquered, did not reappear, nor did Tumen. Jack turned to Arabella, and they shared a moment of silence for their fallen crewmate. Then, they heard a rush of footsteps coming up the hillside. They turned to see Fitzwilliam and John, followed by Constance struggling in the snow, and behind them, Tumen! "Oh, my stars," Arabella said, holding her hands to her mouth. Tears of joy and relief welled up in her eyes. The spirit of Montezuma must have saved him. Arabella ran to Tumen and embraced him. Jack rushed over as well. "You're all right, mate. See, I told you we'd make you right as rain," Jack said. "So how was the other side?" he asked. "Cold," Tumen responded. Everyone laughed uncomfortably. "Well, it couldn't be any colder than it is here," Jack said. "Let's sail out of here quickly to somewhere warm." "Tumen wants to return home," John told them. "Then it is off to the Yucatan. You never deny a man his undying wish," Jack said. Jack gathered up the sword and put it in its scabbard. "What are you going to do with that thing, Jack?" Arabella asked. "There's someone to whom I owe a debt, and this is just a payment she will accept." As they made their way through the town square, the residents of Puerto San Judas looked bewildered and puzzled. Children were joyfully building snowmen and tossing snowballs at one another. "Well, this is odd," Jack said. A finely dressed man approached the crew. "You there, strangers," he called out to them. I am governor here. I demand you tell me who you are and what you know of what had happened on this island." "What is the last thing you remember?" Jack asked. The man shook his head confusedly, clearly straining to remember any detail he could. "I don't remember anything," he said. "None of us does." "Well then," Jack said, smiling, "I guess nothing happened." As the crew boarded the Barnacle, Jack leaned over the hull and shouted down at the townsfolk, "But you might want to consider changing the name of your dear home to Snowy Island. Better to start chopping firewood." "Crew," Jack shouted, "chart a course to the Yucatan." "Aye, sir," John said, saluting his captain. "And remember," Jack continued, "I need to make a quick stop at the mouth of the Pantano River along the way." So Cortes has now been vanquished, and by Montezuma, which I thought was super cool the first time I read it. And Tumen has also been brought back to life. So it's a happy ending for everyone, along with the people of Puerto San Judas who have finally returned. But there's a little bit more to cover in this book. There's actually an epilogue, which is very exciting, back with Tia Dalma. So let's take a look at this real quick. "Jack Sparrow, you've come back. Not that I am surprised. The sea told me you would return with your fair payment. And you've brought guests," Tia Dalma said. Jack and his crew sat in the Mystic's shack. Jack was cool, as usual. The crew, on the other hand, was in awe. Constance cowered in a corner, and John was antsy. After all, it was Tia Dalma who had turned Constance from John's sister into a cat. Jack stepped up to the legendary Mystic and presented her with a sword. "All yours, love," Jack said. "The sword belongs to no one," Tia Dalma corrected, "but I will house it here, and it will not be misused again." "Madam, please, I beg your forgiveness, but please, madam," John said, stammering. "The power to return your sister to her previous form lies in Jack Sparrow's hands now," Tia Dalma said, reading John's thoughts. "What? But how?" John asked, looking back and forth between Jack and Tia Dalma. Tia Dalma smiled. "I have no bloody idea what she's talking about," Jack said. "And now," he continued, quickly changing the subject, "we must be going." "Proceed carefully, Jack Sparrow," Tia Dalma said, showing Jack and his crew to the door. "You've already drunk a sip of what the sea has in store for you. And be warned, the sword is not the only curse Cortes has left behind." "No worries, love," Jack said as he and his crew left Tia Dalma's shack and boarded a longboat. "From now on, it's only uncursed treasure for us. Riches are a perfectly fine way to secure freedom, savvy?" "Jack Sparrow, do not play the fool," Tia Dalma said. "You know better than anyone on the seven seas, and in the Caribbean, magic and treasure go hand in hand." Tia Dalma smiled and winked at Jack. Then she quickly closed the door of her swampland shack behind them. And that is the end of Book 4, The Sword of Cortes, which brings an end to the story arc that has spanned these first 4 books. I also love the little mention that Tia Dalma says to Jack, that the Sword of Cortes was not the only curse Cortes has left behind. Of course, hinting toward the Aztec gold on Isla de Muerta, that, of course, is the whole subject of the Curse of the Black Pearl. So very, very exciting little mention there. But next up is Book 5, which is titled The Age of Bronze, which will be the start of our next big adventure with Jack, Arabella, Fitzy, John, Tumen, and Constance. So I hope you've all enjoyed these episodes so far covering these books. I have really enjoyed putting these together and being able to discuss them with you all. And the past 3 episodes have all been performing really well. Like, I'm so surprised. And I cannot thank you all enough. It really means a lot that you're all listening along with me. You know, I've even seen some people tell me they have been buying the books to read them alongside these episodes, which is just incredible to hear. It just makes me so happy. And to people who have read these books countless times and know them like the back of their hand, I hope I'm doing them justice. I know there's lots of Young Jack Sparrow fans out there. I don't want to let you all down. So I hope I'm doing these books justice. So let me know what your favorite moment was from the Sword of Cortes arc. I would love to hear what you loved the most. But that is it for now. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you if you rated or reviewed the podcast, and it really just means a lot to me. Even if you're just listening, thank you. Thank you for listening. It really means the world to me. But I will see you all back here next time with Book 5 of the Young Jack Sparrow series, The Age of Bronze. Take care. Podcast of the Caribbean is in no way affiliated with Disney. If you want to send me an email or a question, you can send it over to podcastofthecaribbean@gmail.com. You can also follow this podcast on Instagram at Podcast of the Caribbean and over on Twitter/X at PodcastPOTC. I post fun content and trivia over there, so make sure to check those platforms out. But be sure to always keep a weather eye on the horizon, and always remember, dead men tell no tales.